is up, everybody? My name is James McCool. I am the owner of Paydirt, and this is going to be another main slate breakdown for NFL. This one's going to be for Week 4. We're already about a quarter of the way into the season now, which is pretty crazy. Usually it sneaks up on you, and then it takes a while to get through the season, and this year it feels like things are just kind of flying by. So pretty stoked to get into this one. I think that I have a pretty good grasp on this week so far. There's a lot of really interesting chalk the more that I have dug into things and the more that I've thought through things. So I'm excited to break everything down. If you have not watched one of these videos before, what I usually do is I'll start with the macro part. I'll look at the Team Vegas baselines and team totals and stuff like that, pass rates, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll go into the player-by-player stuff and the things that matter in regards to that. We'll talk a little bit about chalk. We'll talk a little bit about leverage. We'll talk a little bit about roster construction. But for the most part, what we're trying to do here is glean through each and every game and see what we care about and what we don't care about. If you are not already a subscriber over at PaydirtDFS.com, you should go grab a subscription. Everything that I'm reading through here, all the projections that I talk about, comes from the models over there. There's also a whole bunch of different free stuff over there as well. So you can find free research sheets. You can find receiver and running back research sheets. You can find league-based stuff like pass rates and red zone rates. You find a whole bunch of cool stuff over there. So if you haven't already checked out the site, you should go check out the site. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into this. We're going to start with the lowest over-unders and move into the highest over-unders, just so that I don't get caught up talking about the good games and forget to talk about the bad games. So what you see over here is you see the Vegas implied stuff. This is the whole macro table. Looks like the lowest over-under that we have on the week here is going to be between the New York Giants and the Chicago Bears. It's sitting at an over-under of 38 at the time of recording this. Both of these teams suck, and there's going to be a lot of chalk in this game, actually. So New York Giants are 3-point favorites here. They have a 63% adjusted pass rate, projected for just 0.98 passing touchdowns and 1.31 rushing touchdowns, whereas Chicago, as 3-point underdogs, only a 43% adjusted pass rate, super duper low. Only projected for 25.84 passing attempts, 31 rushing attempts, projected for 0.13 passing touchdowns and 1.83 rushing touchdowns. So even though they have one of the lowest expectations in the league in terms of points scored, their team total is only 17.5. They're sitting at the third highest expected rushing touchdowns of the entire slate. And that's good news for some of the heaviest chalk on the slate, Khalil Herbert. There's no David Montgomery here, so Khalil Herbert is going to step into a starting role. He has mostly crushed it as a starter in this league. He's mostly done very well, so it makes sense that he's going to be really chalky. His price is just not quite high enough for where it needs to be. On the other side, we have Saquon Barkley, who's going to be pretty popular as a running back play as well. Expect him to be probably the third or fourth highest owned running back. The Giants are a team that end up doing really well for him, even in games where they don't score a lot anyway. So the only other main piece of chalk here is going to be Richie James Jr. The Giants don't have any healthy receivers, so it makes sense he's going to be chalk. He projects pretty well as well. But, when you have heavy chalk in games with really low totals, typically it's a good idea to avoid it, because that just means there's not going to be very many opportunities for points to be scored. Neither one of these teams is effective when they get into the red zone. It just doesn't set up very well to find ceiling games, and especially it doesn't set up very well to find ceiling games if you're an underdog in that spot. So Khalil Herbert being really heavy chalk here, I expect him to be the highest owned running back on the slate. I know that ownership projections don't quite bear that out, but I expect him to be the highest owned running back on the slate, highest owned piece of chalk on the slate, period. For him to be a 3-point underdog on a team that just is not very effective or efficient and might not score a single touchdown, that gives me a lot of pause. So I think I'm probably willing to fade Khalil Herbert, but I just need to see how lineups shake out. He does look really valuable. When I ran optimizations earlier, he looked pretty valuable. So we'll see how that goes. But typically it's a good idea to fade chalk in games that don't have very high totals. And this game has a total under 40 and is expected to go under that as well. So not exactly sure how I'm going to treat Khalil Herbert. On the other side, Saquon Barkley is a little bit better. If you are going to leverage this, I think that the best way to leverage Chicago is simply by just playing the Giants defense and just like not playing Khalil Herbert. But the best way to leverage Saquon Barkley is actually with a New York Giants stack. Nobody's going to use Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has as much rushing upside, I think, as Marcus Mariota. He's been rushing quite a bit this year. And, he's willing to take off and just go for it. So New York Giants stacks, Richie James Jr. is going to be really popular, but Daniel Jones is not. So doing Daniel Jones with Richie James Jr. stack and fading the Saquon Barkley and the Khalil Herbert chalk is really, really interesting if you're going to use somebody from this game. Moving forward onto the next game, this over-under is only 40. It is Green Bay versus New England. Green Bay is a 9.5-point favorite here. Their team total is 24.75. Neither one of these teams is super pass heavy. Green Bay sitting at a 57% adjusted pass rate. New England sitting at a 59% adjusted pass rate. Green Bay passing expectation for touchdowns is 1.76. New England is only 0.86. So what do we got here? Green Bay, they're a bad offense this year. They look pretty bad. They don't really have any reliable receivers. It looks like it's probably just going to be if Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon can't really get things going, the offense is just not going to get going. On the other hand, New England does not have Mac Jones. They have Brian Hoyer. I don't know that it's that big of a downgrade. Brian Hoyer has been serviceable most of the time when he's gotten starts. So I don't think that that's really that huge downgrade. I also think that New England should cover here. Like, the best bet on the board is probably New England to cover. And if you're feeling really frisky, take them to win outright, because New England is a bad team, but Green Bay has a lot of problems. Like, they can't score in the second half. When they get off script, they end up being really slow and clunky. They're just not a good offense. And New England, even though they're missing Jacoby Myers, they still have Devontae Parker. They still have Nelson Aguilar. They still have their stable of running backs. Like, they're not the worst team. I think these teams are a lot closer than the line suggests, and probably to cover 9.5 is the best bet on the board here. As far as DFS goes, Devontae Parker looks really good in projections. He's cheap. He's only 4,600. He looks like a pretty good value play if you're trying to fit in some of the other guys. He showed up a lot in optimizations for me as well. I think ended up being a top 5 play there in terms of exposure. On the other side for Green Bay, it's really just Aaron Jones that I'm interested in. I don't want to take any shots on the wide receivers, even though they could end up producing. The passing expectation of 1.76 passing touchdowns is okay. But again, this is a really low total. It's only 40. I expect both these teams to end up being bad in the second half. And New England, I think, should cover. So I think this game is just going to mostly just be a low-scoring affair. I think that people will ask me about Ramondre Stevenson, and I'm fine with him. I probably don't get there in 3 to 5 lineups, but I get it. I'm fine with it. Next game that we have here is Pittsburgh and New York Jets. So this game is a 41 over-under. Pittsburgh is a 3.5-point favorite. They have a 57% adjusted pass rate, passing touchdown expectation of 1.25, rushing expectation of 1.24. The Jets, on the other hand, 61% adjusted pass rate, 1.92 passing touchdown expectation, 0.18 rushing touchdown expectation. So right off the board, a 1.92 passing touchdown expectation for the Jets is really, really high. But that's because as soon as they get in the red zone, they just fucking throw the ball. Like, they have a 90% adjusted pass rate in the red zone, or 89%. It's really, really high. They basically just don't want to run when they get in the red zone. Now, that might change with Zach Wilson at the helm, but I don't think that it will. I don't see a reason for them to change that. Typically, teams will have a portion of their playbook dedicated to the red zone, and if the portion of the playbook dedicated to the red zone for the Jets is passing the ball a lot, then they're just going to keep passing the ball a lot. So I said it last week, and I'll say it again. I think there's some meat on the bone here for this New York Jets offense when it comes to DFS. Zach Wilson is a more accurate thrower of the football and probably makes better decisions at this point in his career than Joe Flacco. So he should be able to get the ball to guys like Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson and Corey Davis. I think that he's going to be good for them, make this offense a little bit better. So they might run a little bit more in between the 20s, but I think they continue to be really pass heavy when they get into the red zone. They're 3.5-point underdogs here. Pittsburgh's not exactly a high-powered offense. They haven't really done much. Deontay Johnson looks really good because he's really good. Najee Harris is getting a really good complement of work, but has not had the results yet. So those are the two main guys for Pittsburgh. As far as this game goes, secondary stacks are the way to go. Like doing Deontay Johnson with Elijah Moore or Deontay Johnson with Garrett Wilson, I think is a really, really strong way to go about it. You could even do some New York Jets stacks here, right? You could do Zach Wilson with Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, bring it back with Deontay Johnson. That's totally fine too. I wouldn't go crazy with it. I don't think that it's necessary to go balls deep here. But I do think there's some things to be had for this New York Jets offense, and I think that it's worthwhile to look at. Next game, also a 41 over-under. This one is Dallas and Washington. Dallas 3-point favorite here. Just a pass rate of 58%. Passing touchdown expectation 0.62. Rushing touchdown expectation 1.84. On the other hand, Washington, adjusted pass rate of 72%. I believe that leads the league. Passing touchdown expectation 1.62. Rushing touchdown expectation 0.51. Okay, so Washington looked like an absolute tire fire last week. That's fair. There's going to be games where Carson Wentz looks like a tire fire because of the way that he plays. But, like, he was more than serviceable the first 2 weeks in terms of fantasy. In fact, week 1, I think he was a GPP winner in terms of quarterback performances. I think he scored 31 fantasy points or something like that. Looked really, really good. And pieces of this offense are going to continue to be really valuable. Curtis Samuel going to continue to be valuable. Logan Thomas is getting back to his full complement of tight end 1 usage. Terry McLaurin has not quite gotten there yet, but it looked more promising last week as well, and he was still low owned. Nobody is going to own this offense, and Washington has a high passing touchdown expectation sitting at 1.62. They're going to pass the ball a lot. They have the highest adjusted pass rate in the league at 72%. They don't really want to run the ball. This offense has a lot of upside, and it's really easy to bring it back with CeeDee Lamb and make things just work really, really easily. Like, there's no reason why a Washington stack here doesn't work. From the Dallas side, the Tony Pollard production is just so good, and his projection is actually higher than Zeke on significantly less of the market share of rushing. Because he just gets there, man. He just does so well. It seems like every game he has a big play. But that being said, Zeke is going to continue to get the bulk of the rushing work, and as a favorite against a team like Washington, I think you really have to like Zeke as a low-owned running back play on this slate, especially because Khalil Herbert and Jamal Williams are going to take up so much ownership that Zeke is going to be left down there. He'll probably be definitely less than 10%, probably around like 6% owned in large field GPPs. So I think he makes a lot of sense here as a low-owned running back on this slate. Like I said, CeeDee Lamb is strong. They do get Michael Gallup back, but I think that he really just like I have him for a good role. I have him as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. In fact, here's a hot take. I think that Michael Gallup will end up ending the year as the wide receiver 1 in Dallas. We just haven't seen CeeDee Lamb really own that role and really crush it as a wide receiver 1, and I think that Michael Gallup is a better archetype receiver for it. But I digress. You can roast me for Twitter on that later. Michael Gallup I have as a good wide receiver 2 here. I think he mostly just takes away from Jalen Tolbert and Noah Brown for now. CeeDee Lamb probably continues to get a large market share of the offense, but I think that it just makes the offense better, and Cooper Rush is not bad. So I think that this game actually, even though the total is only 41, I think it goes over that. I think that Washington can produce. I think that Dallas can produce. I think this game actually has some upside, some decent upside, even if Dallas has some problems in the red zone. So I like anything you want to do with it. You can stack up either side. I prefer the Washington stack. It's cheap. They pass a lot. and being able to do something like Carson Wentz, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, and CeeDee Lamb makes a lot of sense and works out really well. Or you can do Washington with Carson Wentz, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, and bring it back with Ezekiel Elliott and play towards the idea that Washington is going to be playing catch-up in the second half. Next game, we have Indianapolis versus Tennessee. Game is a 43 over-under. So Indianapolis, 60% adjusted pass rate, projected for 1.65 passing touchdowns, 0.95 rushing touchdowns. Tennessee, 60% adjusted pass rate, just for 1.38 passing touchdowns, 0.83 rushing touchdowns. So these are the same team. Like, straight on fucking Spider-Man meme. They want to do the same thing. They have the same identity. They're the same team. The key here is whoever wins this game is going to have the better running back, because both Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor end up being very game script dependent when it comes to their ability to carry a game and really put up a good fantasy score. Derrick Henry, in fact, the most game script dependent running back in the league over the last 3 years. I think Scott Barrett tweeted that out last night. Jonathan Taylor certainly getting there as well this year, whereas if they do not win the game and he doesn't have time to really run it out, he just ends up being mostly muted. So that's really the main note on this game, man. I guess that you can like Michael Pittman. I guess you can like Treylon Burks, but I don't want to lay my hat on Matt Ryan and Ryan Tannehill when I could have Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. It just seems like that's not something that you should do. So if you want to play either one of the running backs from this game, I'm fine with that. I don't hate it, but like, there's no way that I'm touching the wide receivers. I just took a sip of energy drink at 6 o'clock in the morning. Happy Sunday. Next game, 43 over-under as well. This one is Carolina and Arizona. So Carolina, 65% adjusted pass rate, 1.09 passing touchdown expectation, 1.37 rushing touchdown expectation. Arizona, 57% adjusted pass rate, 1.57 passing touchdown expectation, 0.78 rushing touchdown expectation. Christian McCaffrey is going to play. He did have a little thigh issue thing that he was dealing with in practice. It never really seemed serious anyway. But Carolina sucks. Like, Baker just cannot get this offense going. Matt Rube, as he should be called. That's his name now. Just so bad in terms of the way that he's trying to get this offense to run. I don't have really confidence in anyone on this team. Arizona, more of the same, really. They have a lot of injuries. A.J. Brown is out this week as well, so you're going to have a receiving core of Marquise Brown, Greg Dortch. They do get back Rondale Moore, but like, Rondale Moore has not shown to be a good wide receiver in the NFL so far, and he should have had the role that Greg Dortch now has. But Dortch came in, took a hold of that role. I don't think that he gives it up. I think that he's going to continue to be the downfield threat, and Rondale Moore going to be relegated back to those little screen swing out passes that he was doing last year. So I've gotten some questions about him and his expectation, and that's my expectation, is that he's going to go back to being a little swing route guy. Both these offenses are just bad. I understand wanting to have some Kyler Murray. If you want to go Kyler Murray with Marquise Brown and bring it back with Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore, I guess I'm fine with it, but I probably won't go there. It's just not a spot that I think makes sense. I guess if you wanted to do Christian McCaffrey with DJ or Christian McCaffrey with Marquise Brown, I guess I'm fine with that too. Just don't go crazy. These offenses aren't very good. Next game, we have a 45 over-under. Here is Philadelphia versus Jacksonville. Philadelphia, 6.5-point favorites here. 60% adjusted pass rate, 1.02 passing touchdown expectation, 1.86 rushing touchdown expectation. Jacksonville, 62% adjusted pass rate, or 63% adjusted pass rate, 1.31 passing touchdown expectation, 0.84 rushing touchdown expectation. People think that the Jacksonville defense is good. So it's probably going to lower some ownership on the Philadelphia side. But Jacksonville has faced Carson Wentz, who is super turnover prone. They have faced the rotting husk of Matt Ryan when he had no wide receivers to deal with. And they faced Justin Herbert, who couldn't breathe while he was throwing the football. I'm not going to be sold on the Jacksonville defense with that gauntlet of quarterbacks. While I do think that Carson Wentz is good, he's absolutely a defense's wet dream in terms of what he can provide. So I'm not scared off at all of the Philadelphia side of things here. Jalen Hurts has been absolutely fucking on fire. 300 passing yards before halftime last week. Ends up being able to do just whatever he wants right now. He's impossible to defend in the same way that Lamar Jackson is also impossible to defend. Jalen Hurts just looks ridiculous. He runs more than Lamar Jackson, but it's not quite as effective on the ground. So, like these kind of guys, what are you going to do? Jacksonville's not going to be able to defend Philadelphia whatsoever here. I have no reason to think that they will. A.J. Brown continues to project exceptionally well. I think he's sitting at something ridiculous like 48% of the air yards and 33% of the targets for Philadelphia. Just looking ridiculous on average. Really skinny target tree. I mentioned them in the Stacks and Stats article as one of the main stacks for this week, Philadelphia. On the Jacksonville side, we haven't seen them play from behind yet, and people want to play Travis Etienne because of it. They're like, oh, well, he's the pass-catching back. It's like he has 2 more targets than James Robinson this year. I think he has 9 targets, and James Robinson has 7 targets, or something like that, right? Like, it's not that big of a difference. But regardless, like, the thing that you want to do here is, I guess, you probably want to choose between Zay Jones or Kirk, or Christian Kirk, or Evan Ingram, or Marvin Jones, right? Like, if Zay Jones is out, Marvin Jones looks good. Even if Zay Jones plays, Marvin Jones looks okay. I think that a Philadelphia stack, even if you're doing it a skinny with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, and just bring it back with Zay Jones, I think that works really, really well. That's probably one of my favorite ways to go about things. Zay Jones, cheap, projects well, has a decent market share, has good red zone presence. Like, Zay Jones is pretty good play. It is worth noting that Philadelphia does not have Boston Scott this week, so maybe a tad of a bump up to Miles Sanders a bit, but probably nothing crazy. Then for Jacksonville side, everybody is healthy except for Zay Jones, who's questionable. Marvin Jones gets a bump, for sure, gets a bump. If Zay Jones is out, that would make Marvin Jones probably one of the best plays on the slate. So really, really like this game from both sides. Think that you can stack up either side, but obviously much prefer the Philadelphia side. And also, one last note here. A.J. Brown is probably, again, my favorite play on the entire slate. Like, guy has probably more upside than any other wide receiver in the league right now, including Cooper Kupp. So, moving forward into this next one, we have the Chargers versus Houston. Chargers 6-point favorites here. Total is 45. Chargers 58% adjusted pass rate, expected for 1.85 passing touchdowns and 1.00 rushing touchdowns, whereas Houston 62% adjusted pass rate, 1.25 passing touchdown expectation, 0.93 rushing touchdown expectation. Justin Herbert, a little bit more time to get healthy, I guess. Keenan Allen, I guess, does not have the time to get healthy. Guy just cannot get on the field, which, whatever. I have so much Mike Williams in best ball, I don't care. Unfortunately, I also have a lot of Jalen Guiton in best ball, and I do care about his IR stint, which is a bummer, but whatever, I digress. I don't have a great read of this game. I think that Austin Eckler is going to continue to get a really, really good workload, and with no Keenan Allen, that's been when he has had his highest receiving touchdown potential. So Austin Eckler, I think, is a really solid play here. 6-point favorites for the Chargers, where Justin Herbert is still ailing. I think a really, really good spot for them to just kind of like ride their running backs, Joshua Kelly, Austin Eckler, and just kind of put things together that way and try to defend Justin Herbert's ribs. For Houston, Brandon Cooks is fine, and then there's nobody. I guess you could like Dameon Pierce if you think that if you think that the Chargers are still super hamstrung, which is fine. But it's really just Brandon Cooks or bust. There's no Brevin Jordan this week. I guess that's a note. Farrell Brown gets a little bit of an upgrade there because of that, but I probably still wouldn't use him. Secondary stacks here. Just Austin Eckler, Brandon Cooks, or Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, and just move along. Nothing else to really talk about. Last game that has a 45 over-under, it is Las Vegas versus Denver. Las Vegas 2.5-point favorites here. They have a 70% adjusted pass rate, 1.96 passing touchdown expectation, 0.7 rushing touchdown expectation. Denver 1.95 passing touchdown expectation, 0.43 rushing expectation, but with a 55% adjusted pass rate rather than 70% adjusted pass rate. This looks like an awesome game stack, and Las Vegas is going to continue to be a spot that I go back to. They didn't pay out last week, and that's fine. I mean, they kind of did, I guess, right? Like, Mac Hollins got there. Devontae Adams didn't. Devontae Adams is having, like, a nut low outcome season so far. He's getting fed targets. He's getting fed red zone targets. He is averaging the most red zone targets in the league of any wide receiver. Mentioned that in the stats and stacks as well. So I'm just going to keep going back to this Las Vegas offense. They're really, really pass heavy. They don't want to have a run game, really. They're just trying to pass the ball and keep up. Denver, on the other hand, I think that Russell Wilson last week kind of finally realized that Nathaniel Hackett is a moron and that he just probably needs to take things into his own hands. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to be a super, super high upside play every single week, but I think that he is going to start making some of his own calls in the huddle and taking things into his own hands a little bit more. That being said, Cortland Sutton, phenomenal play. He's a phenomenal play every week. He's just really, really good. He was I was confused why people thought that Jerry Jeudy would ever end up being the wide receiver one in this offense when Cortland Sutton has just shown that he's so much better and so much more explosive. Like, he's just a better wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy probably a better route runner, but Cortland Sutton just built like a wide receiver one. This game is just awesome for stacking. You can stack it up either way. I prefer the Las Vegas side because they're more pass heavy between the 20s, but both of these teams have some of the highest passing touchdown expectations of the entire slate, 1.96, 1.95. Those are both really, really high. The only other team that has one that high is going to be Buffalo, and then after that, it is the New York Jets, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of passing touchdown expectation here. Going with Las Vegas side is probably easier because we know where it's going, right? Like, it's Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Mac Hollins, and Darren Waller. There's no Foster Moreau, so Jesper Horsted, I guess, is a punt that you can have. He showed up a couple of times in my optimizations. On the Denver side, however, it's Cortland Sutton, kind of Jerry Jeudy, kind of Alberto, kind of Javonte Williams. Like, it kind of gets a little bit weird on the Denver side outside of Cortland Sutton. So I prefer Las Vegas side, but just stack it up. I think it's a really, really good spot here. Going into the games, we have 3 left. These are the higher totals. So Cleveland, Atlanta, 47 over under. Cleveland is a 1-point favorite here. 43% adjusted pass rate, just about as low as Chicago. 1.01 passing touchdown expectation, 1.67 rushing touchdown expectation. Atlanta, 50% adjusted pass rate, 1.09 passing touchdown expectation, 1.48 rushing touchdown expectation. So these teams have a lot of kind of the same macro identity, right, where they would prefer to be rush heavy. They have a higher rushing touchdown expectation, but obviously the offenses work significantly differently. The Browns with Jacoby Brissett are still more dependent on him putting the ball where it needs to be for Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and apparently David Njoku, who people have been on, and props to y'all. But they still depend on him getting it to his guys when Nick Chubb is not able to get the first down, right? So they still have to depend on Jacoby Brissett a little bit with his arm, whereas they would much rather just have Nick Chubb run for 297 million yards and 6 touchdowns, right? So on the other hand, for Atlanta, Marcus Mariota has been rushing a lot. They look like Baltimore light. They're very condensed. They have Kyle Pitts and Drake London as basically the only receiving options that you can pair or should pair with Marcus Mariota. And they have Cordero Patterson, who is kind of still this jack of all trades guy and can end up getting them both rushing and receiving expectation and production. So I don't think people will be as high on Atlanta as they should be. I think that Atlanta comes in as maybe the fourth, maybe fifth highest stack on this slate. I could be wrong. Maybe they're third or fourth. But I think people will be a little bit lower on them, and they shouldn't be. Marcus Mariota with Drake London is a fantastic combination. Marcus Mariota with Kyle Pitts is a fantastic combination. And, you can bring it back relatively easily with Nick Chubb on the other side. You can do Amari Cooper, too, if you hate yourself, but I'd prefer to do just Nick Chubb. Also, speaking of that, Nick Chubb looks like one of the best plays on the slate at running back. He should be sub 10% owned in a spot here against this Atlanta team that certainly is not some vaunted defense that is going to be able to absolutely shut down the Cleveland offense. And Nick Chubb has just been on a tear so far. I think he scored 3 rushing touchdowns last week. Did incredibly well. Was one of the only running backs to actually produce. Also, Cordell Patterson was one of the running backs to produce. I like him as well if you are trying to pivot away from either Jamal Williams or Khalil Herbert in GPPs. Both running backs are viable. Stacking from either side is viable. I do like an Atlanta stack more. I like Marcus Mariota with Drake London. I think that's a really, really good stack to go with, and it's pretty cheap. It allows you to do a lot with the rest of your lineup. So pretty high total, pretty decent expectations here. I think Marcus Mariota is a really strong play. And then Nick Chubb is probably the best running back pivot on the slate by far. 48 over under here for Detroit and Seattle. Detroit is a 3.5 point favorite here. 56% rushing expectation or 56% passing adjusted pass rate. 1.5 passing touchdown expectation, 1.38 rushing expectation for touchdowns. Seattle, on the other hand, 67% adjusted pass rate, 1.25 passing touchdown expectation, 1.24 rushing touchdown expectation. I don't know why people are willing to go with Geno Smith-Jock. He's going to be really popular. I posted on Twitter the other day that I thought that it was crazy that people were considering Geno Smith because of the Detroit defense. And one, I want to clarify that the crazy part about it is not really considering Geno Smith. The crazy part about it is considering Geno Smith because of the Detroit defense. Like, it's 2022 and people are still trying to justify a play based on how the opposing defense treats it. Like, we have so much data that doesn't matter, and that anybody who is still using positional defensive metrics to justify plays is just like ignoring a lot of data that says that kind of stuff doesn't really matter, especially considering the small samples that we get, and especially considering the non-parity in the league when it comes to good and bad defenses. Whereas the extremes and the externalities of defense make it look like some defenses should be better or worse when really they all just kind of have this death march towards the middle. But yeah, I think that Geno Smith projects fine. I think he's a really good cash game play. But I just can't justify using him in GPPs. Like, so one thing here, and here's some projections and stacks and stuff, but his projection only accounts for 31.71% of the total stack projection for Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett stack, which is the lowest on the slate. Like, his production actually does not matter in terms of that stack paying off. What matters is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And we know from history that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett do not necessarily have ceiling games together. Typically, it is one or the other. So what do we have here? We have people wanting to use Geno Smith with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett when DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett typically are not correlated with each other, and Geno Smith typically doesn't have a ceiling. Like, for the first time in his career, he had more than 300 passing yards last game. And he's had starts before. Like, it's not like we don't have this long history of what Geno Smith is or what Geno Smith can be. We know who he is. He's a bridge QB. He doesn't have a whole lot of upside. He's gonna have a good game every once in a while because the law of sample sizes is gonna say that every once in a while we're gonna have these externalities. Last week was the externality. Like if you didn't use him last week, you probably missed the boat. And so I think trying to jump on the boat this week when he's gonna be, I think, 15% owned, that's just big no from me, dog. So I'm off Seattle offense. In terms of stacking. Now, that being said, I do think that Tyler Lockett is a really, really good play this week as a one-off or as a secondary correlation if you want to go with a Jamal Williams and Tyler Lockett stack. I think that that's fine as a secondary correlation. DK Metcalf is probably okay too, but man, I'm not touching Geno Smith. I just can't do it. It's just fucking Geno Smith, man. And Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll sucks too. On the other side of this, Detroit does not have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They don't have DeAndre Swift. They don't have DJ Chark. They might not have Josh Reynolds, even though I think he's going to play. So what do we have? We have Jared Goff with a whole bunch of backup wide receivers and TJ Hawkinson with Jamal Williams. Like, it wouldn't surprise anybody if they don't score more than like one touchdown, right? Like, we have seen the low end of Jared Goff in his career. Like, again, this is another guy like Geno Smith. Like, it's not like he's this second-year QB that we don't know what his untapped upside or downside is. Like, Jared Goff sucks. He's not really very good. I think he's been propped up a lot by Amon-Ra St. Brown. And even if this offense has been designed in a way that maybe complements him more than last year, I don't think that I want to buy in on him here when the best wide receiver that he's going to have is going to be Josh Reynolds. Like, I don't think I want to buy that. Josh Reynolds, Quintez Cephas, and Khalif Raymond are going to be his wide receiver core with TJ Hawkinson. There's no reason why TJ Hawkinson can't get like 10 targets here, but maybe he gets 10 targets, 6 receptions for 45 yards and no touchdowns, right? Like maybe that's his score. Jamal Williams looks to be super heavy chalk, second highest owned player on the slate, and I mean I'm considering fading him too because like what happens if this offense just doesn't do anything? I don't know why this game can't just score 27 real-life points with a 13-14 outcome. And everybody's just disappointed by playing a whole bunch of chalk in this game when it ended up having the lowest overall score. It's really interesting that there's so much chalk put onto these two teams or these two games that realistically could be the lowest scoring games on the slate. You could argue that still the reason why you're playing them is because of the market share expectation and because they are very condensed. And that's really the only argument that you can make right now, right? Like, Khalil Herbert should end up with 60% of the rushing work and like a 12% receiving share or something like that and have basically all of the rushing touchdown equity. Jamal Williams should have like a 65% market share of the rushing work and 15% of the receiving work, right? And the vast majority of the rushing touchdown work. But if these teams only score one touchdown and that touchdown does not go to Khalil Herbert or Jamal Williams, they score like 15 to 18 fantasy points, and that might not be enough. There's a lot of really good running back plays on this slate to where I don't know that those are the plays that you really want to make. Like, why couldn't Javonte Williams, who has basically the same role as Jamal Williams, end up having the game that everybody wants Javonte Williams to have, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on Detroit and Seattle and my thoughts on the fragility of the chalk overall. I do think that the running back chalk here is very, very fragile. We know that running backs typically need points to be scored in order to be really effective in DFS. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to think about. I'm still on the fence I'll end up making a declaration in the Discord about whether I'm going to be playing them, but I think as of now, certainly think you need to be very reticent of the running back chalk here this week. Moving on to this last game, we have Buffalo and Baltimore. This game is a 51 over-under. Buffalo, 3-point favorites, 69% adjusted pass rate, basically 70%, 1.96 passing touchdown expectation, 1.06 rushing touchdown expectation. Baltimore, 58% adjusted pass rate, 1.07 passing touchdown expectation, 1.61 rushing touchdown expectation. Just fucking stack this game however you want. Like, these offenses crush. Lamar Jackson is on the brink of being the only QB ever to have 3 straight 100 rushing yard games. Josh Allen is just shattering fantasy as well. Like, both these guys have had 40-plus fantasy point games already this year. Their offenses are terrific. Mark Andrews is fantastic, has like a 35% split of air yards and target share. Rashad Bateman looks really good as a deep threat. Devin Duvernay is coming forward as a wide receiver 2 in this offense and really opening things up a lot. For Buffalo, Stephon Diggs had a 4-touchdown game, I think, last week. Just ridiculous. Gabe Davis still exists, but doesn't look quite as advertised, I guess. But they still have Isaiah McKenzie. Jake Kumaro is out this week, so we might see a little bit more of Khalil Shakur, I'm guessing, on that one. I think that's the other wide receiver there. But Dawson Knox is going to play. He should get his as well. Like, you can stack up this game however you want. I like the Baltimore side a little bit more, I think, just because I think that Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews has probably the same expectation as Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, but for cheaper. And you get to take up the priority position of tight end. So I probably prefer the Baltimore side, but man, whatever you want to do with this game, just stack it up. I've had people ask me about weather concerns in this game. I'm just not concerned about it. Like, unless it is heavy snow or 35-mile-per-hour wind, I don't care. And especially I don't care for teams like Buffalo and Baltimore, man. Like, these offenses are going to move. I think it's really, really hard to slow down Lamar Jackson. I think it's really, really hard to slow down Josh Allen, unless we have some super extreme weather, like the field is on fire or something like that. I don't know. So stack up this game however you want. I don't have anything else really to say about that. So this has been a main slate breakdown. I went through every single game. This is a really, really interesting week. Like I said, the running back chalk is so fragile with Khalil Herbert and Jamal Williams. Like, for sure, the expectations are still fine on them. They still project fine. Like, when I go into projections, Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert both project for just about 17 fantasy points. And that they're priced down, right? Jamal Williams, 6,100. Khalil Herbert, 5,700, which is priced down for running backs this year. That's kind of the spot where you want to get them. But you look at that, and you have to assume that they're both going to be 30% or more owned, whereas Nick Chubb is going to be like 6% owned, and Cordell Patterson 6% owned, and Najee Harris probably like 9% owned. Javonte Williams, who's 6,600. Like I said, Javonte Williams is feasibly the same play as Jamal Williams. Like, they are the same play. I don't think that there's any reason why you couldn't have the same kind of production. If I go over and look in the weekly search here for running backs, isolate for Denver. Let's see, Javonte Williams. Let's go from week 3 down. So Javonte Williams in week 3 ends up with 5 targets, 3 receptions, 15% target share. In week 2, ends up with a 15% target share, 4 targets, 1 reception. Week 1, 30% target share, 12 targets, 11 receptions. Now, I don't think that we're ever going to see that 30% target share again. But if he ends up with 5 targets, 5 to 7 targets per game, like, that's the same expectation as what we have for Javonte or for Jamal Williams, right? I just think that there are pivots that you can make, and these guys are going to be way lower owned and just have way better game environments than what we have. Now, Khalil Herbert, I think, is harder to get off of than Jamal Williams, but I think that Jamal Williams, on a team that I don't expect to score very many points, that I don't expect to be able to move the ball very well at all, in a game that I think goes way under the over-under, I just don't think Jamal Williams is really that great of a play. So that is for the running back chalk. The wide receiver chalk, if we go through and we sort by ownership here, the highest owned wide receiver looks to be Stephon Diggs. And then we have Deontay Johnson, Tyler Lockett, Drake London, and CeeDee Lamb. Tyler Lockett chalk, I mean, I guess I have him projected pretty well. But again, like, it's Geno Smith. There's no reason why Tyler Lockett can't just absolutely fall on his face here in terms of fantasy results, just because Geno Smith ends up having a bad game, or they end up being in a low-scoring affair where they just ride Rashad Penny into the ground. Like, there's some very easy ways to see Tyler Lockett fail. On the other hand, Richie James Jr. doesn't look as highly owned as I thought that he was going to be earlier on in the week. He actually ends up looking not that high owned. Now, I'll have one more run of ownership, but I think he should end up being relatively highly owned. If he is going to be high owned, I do think that going with Daniel Jones stack with Richie James makes a lot of sense. But overall, favorite stacks of the week are going to be Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, Las Vegas, and probably, if I had to name one more, I guess Atlanta. So those 5. And the stack to avoid for the most part is going to be Seattle. And if you don't want to play the Khalil Herbert or the Jamal Williams chalk, I think that's totally fine. I think there's a lot of pivots that you can make at running back. And this kind of seems like one of those weeks where we look back and you're like, why did I play these running backs in these super low total games when I could have had this bevy of other running backs that have kind of the same expectation, the same workload, and are in better game environments. So that's going to do it for me. Again, my name is James McCool. I'm the owner of PaydirtDFS.com. If you have not checked out the site, go check out the site. There's a whole bunch of free research stuff over there. All the articles are free. So I'll have another article up for Showdown season for the primetime game tonight as well. There's already a Showdown season article up for the London game as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. And I hope that I see you next time on the main slate breakdown for Paydirt.